Good afternoon, Senator. The challenges of code enforcement in the city are ultimately about the discrepancy between the vision the residents of Atlanta have for the city and the realized physical environment. As such, the questions about code enforcement address the conditions of the regulatory framework or codes in a holistic fashion. These questions are formed around 5 issues: your vision for the city, aligning the code with that vision, the public process, educating the public, and enforcement of the codes. Briefly, what will you do to ensure that the codes align with yours and ultimately our physical vision for the city?
Well, the first thing that I will do is to treat the Department of Planning and the code enforcement officials within the city of Atlanta with my support and treat them like what they are, which is a vital part of what the city of Atlanta does. Let me give you an example. I've been running for mayor now more than 13 months. I've attended more than 120 meetings the last time there, and I counted. And we hear about code enforcement in community meetings more than we do almost any other subject except for crime. But when you look at Atlanta's government, that's not what is getting attention. What you've seen is you've seen the Bureau of Planning and the Department of Code Enforcement significantly reduced. I mean, right now you have in the Office of the Solicitors, the solicitor is the prosecutorial arm of municipal government. The solicitor's office in the city of Atlanta used to be staffed with 54 individuals. Today they're 18. In my judgment, that is a major problem with code enforcement. You have one solicitor right now who's prosecuting all code enforcement violations in the city of Atlanta. Yet I hear about code enforcement more than anything. You have one judge who is handling code enforcement cases. So my global view will be to treat planning and code enforcement like what it is, which is one of the most important areas for the citizens of Atlanta.
So notwithstanding the issue of the efficacy of code enforcement from a personnel standpoint, do you
Yes.
believe that there are specific issues with the code itself that can be modified to help reinforce your vision for the city?
Yes, but reforming the code, candidly, is going to take more time because it may involve a charter review and it may also involve state action. What I believe that I believe we have more problems with the enforcement part of code enforcement than we do with the actual code today.
That's an interesting perspective, and I would ask, at that point, what is a specific example of an enforcement issue that is less important than, let's say, the regulatory framework that's set up? I know there have been a number of meetings about projects that are actually legal, that are very problematic for the city and the citizens of Atlanta, and there's difficulty in understanding how that works. So what would you do to reconfigure the code to address those issues?
Well, what I would do is to get advice from people who know the space better than I do. So I don't want to sit here today and make up a list of items that I would do. What I do know is reforming the code will take additional work and effort. I would do that in concert with people who are experts in that area, in planning and in that field. But I will reiterate that I believe that we have more problems with enforcement than we do with the code as it sits today.
Do you believe there's a problem with the transparency of the operation of the code itself?
I do.
Do you have an idea of how you might solve that transparency problem?
Absolutely. I believe that I will solve the transparency problem by stopping the reduction of the team that's responsible for ensuring that you have transparency in government. Right now, in the Bureau of Planning and the people who are responsible for code enforcement have suffered cut after cut during the administration. I cited the cut on the solicitor side that I think is weakening us in the code enforcement space.
I don't disagree with that at all.
Okay.
But I would like to point out that there have been issues with the city even prior to those cuts.
Sure.
So I would ask, is there anything beyond just restaffing these areas that might help reinforce the efficacy of the code in the city context?
Well, as I shared, I think that as it relates to our code, I would hear from experts in the space that would make recommendations on to determine if we needed to change the code. As I said, that would require some modifications to our charter and may require additional state legislation. I would be open to all of that in order to achieve that objective. I don't believe that the staffing issues around planning and code enforcement are small matters. I think that they are very important, and I think that they contribute to the lack of emphasis that has been placed on code enforcement in our city.
How can we help educate the citizens of Atlanta to better participate in the process of building and maintaining the city?
I think that we can educate them by having a mayor that places a priority on it and that goes out and talks to people in a robust way. There is no more important guide for public opinion in the city of Atlanta than what the mayor places a priority on. I've shared with you that I've heard about code enforcement and the challenges related to code enforcement more than I've heard about almost any issue in the city of Atlanta. So it will be personally important to me.
And do you believe that the current code enforcement staff is adequately trained to do their job?
I'm not prepared to make that judgment. What I do know is that code enforcement is such an important issue that they will have to be. And that is one of the areas that will have a greater priority for me than it has today.
How do you propose specifically enforcing the codes in terms of, because you've stated this several times, in terms of, say, public safety, for instance, sidewalk maintenance, or other issues in the city that have to be dealt with?
Yeah. Well, I propose first and foremost to develop a plan, a comprehensive plan to deal with the problem and talk to people who live it and breathe it every single day. So I want to find out, do we have adequate staffing? I don't believe that we do. Do we have a prosecutorial function that is appropriate for the task? I don't believe that we do today. And what are the cities who have the strongest, most appropriate code enforcement measures doing it so that I can get an appropriate guide? But what I know is that one solicitor prosecuting code enforcement violations in the city is not enough. What I know is reducing the size of the Bureau of Planning and the code enforcement space by more than 40% is not the right path for the city of Atlanta, and I will change that direction.
So the current zoning ordinance, as an example, has almost 100 different zoning categories that have been added over the past 27 years. Is it true then that even without going back and reorganizing that, we can solve the majority of our problems solely through the enforcement of the current code?
Well, at no time did I say solely. What I said is I believe that that we have more challenges with enforcement than we do with the code. What I also said, I think rather clearly, is that I would ask for a full review and ask that recommendations be made to me regarding changing the charter and the need for changes at the state level if needed. So I'm open to receiving recommendations from experts in the field. So I think to say that my position was solely is not accurate. That's not what I believe. And I would be prepared to look at all 100 areas if need be, but it would be a part of a comprehensive approach. And my emphasis will be on enforcement. I mean, right now today, the city of Atlanta has the ability to fine people who are damaging neighborhoods and communities $1,000 and place people in jail up to 6 months. And right now, because that function is understaffed and not appropriately managed, we're seeing neighborhoods after neighborhoods that are damaged by dilapidated housing and fields that are being overrun and property that's not being maintained. I think the first thing you need to do for neighborhoods is to use the tools you have before we address the long-term strategic issues that you have raised so thoughtfully today.
And that would be primarily through more and more well-educated code enforcement officials.
That would be a part of my comprehensive approach.
And do you have a timetable for the long-term strategic realignment of the, let's say, the zoning ordinance, for example?
My timetable would be between 120 to 180 days. My number one priority is going to be public safety and securing and strengthening the finances of the city of Atlanta. That's going to be what I'm focused on, certainly during the first 100 days of my tenure. I happen to believe that code enforcement is an important part of your crime plan for a city. So it is going to be reviewed as a part of my comprehensive crime plan.